Good morning. I asked you to draw pictures of the cool city that what Roz was describing in the last chapter, and it was cool, the last set of chapters, and it was cool to see how you had some similarities and some differences between the cities that you all drew, and you really brought them to life. So I feel like Peter Brown should hire you as his illustrator next time. We're jumping in at chapter 73. We're going to try to see as far as we can get because we've only a couple of days to finish this book, but believe me, we're going to. Chapter 73 is called The Pigeons. In the very heart of the city was a great swath of greenery. The old park. It had rolling lawns and flower gardens and dense wooded areas. It had lakes and ponds and fountains, playgrounds, benches, miles and miles of cobblestone pathways. It also had pigeons. Thousands and thousands of pigeons. The city pigeons witnessed things you wouldn't believe, and nothing shocked them. They certainly weren't shocked by robots, so when Roz marched into the middle of the park, the pigeons there weren't troubled in the least. She approached a flock that was about 100 birds strong, all cooing and strutting across the cobblestones, as if they owned the place. But as Roz stomped closer and closer, the pigeons scuttled out of the way to let her pass. However, Roz didn't pass by. She stopped and glanced around, and when she saw that she was alone with the pigeons, she started speaking to them in the language of the animals. "Hello, pigeons. My name is Roz." The pigeons cocked their heads, which meant, "Is this robot really talking to us?" "Yes, I am actually speaking with you," continued Roz. "I'm searching for my son. He's a goose named Brightbill. Have you seen him?" For the first time in a long time, the pigeons were shocked. Several of them fluttered away from the talking robot, but most were too curious to go. One pigeon was so curious she strutted out from the flock and right up to the robot. "Let me get this straight," said the curious pigeon. "Your name's Roz, and you've got a son named Brightbill, who's a goose?" "That's correct." "I can't believe it." The pigeon flapped her wings and turned to the others. "You guys, this is Roz from Graybeak's Stories. Remember?" The flock began cooing excitedly. "You've heard of Graybeak?" said Roz. "Everyone's heard of Graybeak," said the pigeon. A while back, she started telling stories about a goose whose mother was some kind of wild robot. We all thought she was joking, but I guess not. "She was not joking," said Roz, "but I have lost my son, and I do not know how to find him. Perhaps Graybeak could help. Do you know where she is?" Here's a little pigeon picture. "I hate to tell you this, Roz, but Graybeak is no longer with us." The birds lowered their heads. "You know, life ain't easy for us pigeons. We only live for a few years out here, if we're lucky. But we were especially sad when we lost Graybeak. She was one of the best." The others cooed in agreement. "I'm sorry for your loss," said Roz. "I'd wish I'd gotten to meet Graybeak. My son was very fond of her." The pigeon gazed up at the robot with a steely look in her eye. "Any friend of Graybeak is a friend of ours. If Brightbill is lost, we're gonna find him." She turned to the skies. "You heard me, flock. Hit the skies." That's kind of like an idiom, right? Are they actually hitting the skies? No. What does she mean? She means like, let's head out, let's go, right? It's an idiom. "And tell every pigeon you see to start searching for a goose named Brightbill." At those words, the flock erupted into flight. Only the robot and the curious pigeon remained. "By the way, they call me Strutter," said the pigeon, fluffing out her chest feathers. "It's very nice to meet you, Strutter," said the robot, "and thank you for searching for Brightbill. What can I do to help?" You can stay put. I want you in this park when we return with your son. Don't hide, don't wander off, and don't make us go searching for you. And another thing, stay away from the park ranger robot. He spends most of his time taking care of the grounds, but he's always on the lookout for trouble." The pigeon gave a quick salute to the robot, then joined the search for Brightbill. So there's that foreshadowing, it seems, right? The park ranger's always looking out for trouble. We know Roz is worried about trouble, so hopefully they don't get in any trouble. Chapter 74, The Sky. Hours passed and the sun set in the west. More hours passed, and the eastern sky began to glow. Roz spent that whole night in the park waiting for Strutter to return with Brightbill, but there was no sign of them. Roz couldn't let those thoughts distract her. She needed to stay alert, The park ranger robot had seen her once or twice already, and now she heard footsteps wherever she went. Was he following her? Had he noticed our robot's unit number? Would he report her to the RECOs? Roz took a pathway into the woods, trying to escape the ranger's view, and that's when she heard familiar voices calling from the sky. "Where are you, Ma?" said Brightbill. "Come on out, Roz," said Strutter. Roz turned toward the voices, but only saw leaves and branches. Brightbill and Strutter were flying somewhere above the woods. She wanted to call back, but the park ranger was still trailing her. Instead, she followed the sounds of their voices as they glided over the treetops. But then there came a new sound, a buzzing sound. It grew louder and closer. Air started blasting down from the sky, and when Roz looked up, she saw a white triangular airship floating above her. Any thoughts there? Is this going to be trouble? Chapter 75 is called the RECOs, so maybe. 3 robots zipped down from the airship cables. The ground shook as their heavy feet slammed against the cobblestones. Then they stood, side by side, forming a wall with their eyes locked on Roz. RECO 4, 5, and 6. "Hello, Rosum Unit 7134. We are the RECOs. Please come with us." The robotic voice belonged to RECO 4. He and his partners waited for their target to come forward, but she didn't move. She knew how dangerous the RECOs could be, and so did her son. From somewhere in the sky, Brightbill's frightened voice cried out, "Run, Mama, run!" So Roz ran. She dashed up the pathway and leaped into the woods. Without crunching a weed, without rustling a leaf, the robot vanished into the thick foliage. The RECOs weren't concerned. They had other ways of tracking her, or so they thought. Their blocky heads swiveled from side to side, scanning for Roz's electronic signal. They scanned and scanned, but they found no trace of their target. Who remembers why they find no trace of their target? It's because Annabelle and the cows have her tracking device, her electronic signal. Chapter 76, The Morning. A steady stream of foot traffic was flowing past the park that morning. Several pairs of eyes noticed a Rosum robot running out from the trees. They watched as she looked around and started marching along the sidewalk with the rest of the crowd. Roz had lost the RECOs back in the woods, but she knew they wouldn't stop searching. She needed to blend in with the normal robots on the street. So when she came upon a work crew marching toward a construction site, she tried to join the end of the line, but the crew immediately halted and turned to face her. A robot stepped backward, away from the crew, and bumped into a young woman. "I'm sorry," said Roz, gently grasping the woman's shoulder. "Get your hands off me. Whose robot is this? There's something wrong with her." Everyone stopped and stared. Humans pointed. Automobiles slowed. There were whispers about a defective robot on the loose. And then the white triangular airship appeared. It floated out from between the buildings and headed for the robot. Roz lurched forward and backward again and again, trying to think of a plan, until a voice suddenly squawked behind her. "Follow us, Mama!" Brightbill and Strutter swooped past, and the robot went racing after them. She wove through the crowd, sprinted down the streets, leaped across intersections. Horns blared and humans screamed, and robots shuffled out of the way. The birds made one last turn and fluttered into a narrow side street. A group of tomcats were there, lurking in the shadows. They crouched and licked their lips, dreaming of feasting on the goose and the pigeon. Then the robot came stomping up, and the cats hissed and scattered in every direction. Strutter pointed to a heavy circular panel set in the pavement and said, "Lift it up." Roz lifted the panel. Beneath it was a ladder that descended into a deep, dark hole. "Climb down there," said Strutter. "A friend of mine is expecting you." The robot looked from the pigeon to the goose. "Do what she says, Ma," cried Brightbill. "There's no time to waste." "But how will I find you again?" said Roz. "Just go." Trouble, trouble, trouble. Chapter 77, The Underground. Sounds spooky. A robot was standing in a long, shadowy tunnel. Murky water trickled along the floor, and sour smells filled the air. Roz was below ground in the city sewers. Blech. There was a squeak, and the robot's headlights flashed onto a crack in the wall. A rat's pointy face poked out. "You must be Roz," said the rat. wiggling his nose. Can you wiggle your nose? I hear you're in trouble. That is correct, said the robot. I need to get as far from here as possible. I know where to take you, said the rat, and he started scampering down the tunnel. The rat knew the sewers better than anyone, but his short legs couldn't carry him so fast, so Roz picked him up and carried him. She scooped him up, plopped him on her shoulder, and said, Tell me where to run. With the rat squeaking directions in her ear, Roz stomped deeper into the underground. She splashed down side tunnels, crawled through narrow passages, carefully crossed subway tracks. Occasionally, they came upon a cavernous chamber. Most of the chambers were empty, but some contained jumbles of pipes. The rat would scurry across the damp, dirty floor while the robot climbed the pipes as if they were trees. Mechanical sounds echoed out from the tunnels. Robot crews were hard at work. They spent their lives laboring below the city. Many would never, ever see the light of day. Roz was curious, of course, but she dared not to spy on them. Those workers had no idea that a fellow robot was sneaking through their underground home. After traveling through miles of tunnels, the rat and the robot came to a dead end. A ladder was bolted to the wall and disappeared into a hole in the ceiling. I don't know what you'll find up there, squeaked the rat, but good luck. It cannot be any worse than where I was, said Roz, placing him on the ground. Thank you for your help. The robot gave the rat a quick scratch behind his ears and then climbed up to the street. Let's do one more. Let's get wild. Chapter 78. Oh, action. The chase. Here we go. It's a little bit long, but it's okay. The street was empty. No people walking, no robots working, no automobiles driving. Roz looked to the sky, hoping to see Brightbill or Strutter, but what she saw was a fleet of white triangular airships floating above the city. Rosum Unit 7134, do not move. 3 robots zipped down from a ship on cables. RECOs 10, 11, and 12. Each held a weapon at his side, but they didn't fire, not yet. Their orders were to retrieve the target unharmed, if possible. Our robot's survival instincts blared like sirens in her head, and she burst away from the RECOs. She sprinted down the empty street and turned onto another. All the streets seemed to be empty, but they wouldn't be for long. More and more big, bulky robots came zipping down to join the chase. The RECOs moved like machines. Their target moved like an animal. The wild robot stayed low, gliding across the streets, darting around buildings and vanishing in shadows. Roz never should have gone into that alley. She was halfway through it when the RECOs appeared at both ends. There was only one direction to go. Using all the strength in her legs, our robot launched herself high into the air and clamped onto the side of a building. Frightened faces peered out of windows, but Roz didn't want to frighten anyone. She wanted to go home. The robot launched herself up and across the alley and clamped onto the opposite building. Back and forth she went, leaping between the buildings, climbing higher and higher until she landed on a flat, lofty rooftop. The sky was filled with the airships. All at once, they turned toward Roz. Their engines buzzed as they closed in on our robot. But then came a strange, swishing sound. Pigeons. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Wave upon wave of pigeons streamed up from the streets and swarmed around the airships. Strutter had rallied her friends from every corner of the city. They'd always hated airships, buzzing loudly, crowding skies, forcing the birds to fly low. And now a city's worth of pigeons were finally unleashing their anger. As you'd expect, the airship fought back. Blazing beams of light flickered across the skyline, leaving charred feathers floating in the breeze. But the pigeons didn't retreat. They tightened around the ships, distracting them, confusing them. There was a deafening screech. A ship spiraled out of sight, leaving a trail of smoke behind it. Roz watched in horror as more pigeons and ships fell down. She hollered for the birds to fly away, but they were lost in a fighting frenzy. Heavy feet thumped on the roof. Rosum, Unit 7134, do not move. Roz didn't look, so she just ran from the voice, leaped to the next rooftop, and kept running. Our robot leaped up to a higher roof and down to a lower. Up and down she went, leaping from building to building, footsteps thundering behind her. But still, the RECOs did not fire their lasers. Mama, I'm here! Brightbill swooped alongside his mother as she ran. What should we do? Brightbill, you must fly to safety, hollered Roz. It is too dangerous up here. And then in a softer voice, the robot said, I I can't escape. No, Mama, you've come so far. Don't give up now. But Roz was finished running. She slowed and stopped at the edge of the rooftop. The goose fluttered into her arms, and our friends held each other close. You have been such a good son, said Roz. You've saved my life so many times. But now you must save yourself. Go on without me. Will I see you again, said Brightbill, wiping his eyes. I don't think so. They still had so much to say to each other. There simply wasn't any more time, so they said the only words that really mattered. I love you, Mama. I love you, son. Airships circled above. RECOs dropped onto the roofs. Lasers pointed at the robot. A voice boomed. Rosum, Unit 7134, do not move. But Roz did move. She heaved her son toward the sky so that he could fly to safety. And in that instant, a blazing beam of light flashed over to the robot's leg. Damaged sensors flared as the leg turned bright orange and melted. Poor Roz tried to keep her balance, but she was already toppling backward off the roof. She seemed to hang in the air, sparkling in the sunlight, and then she fell down, down, down to the street below. As Roz was falling, she took one last look at Brightbill soaring in the sky above. She watched him get smaller and smaller, and then everything suddenly went dark. Oh my goodness. So, just to catch you up here, we're ending on page 236. The book still has a fair amount of pages to go. What do you think happens next? This is a major time for a prediction. What do you think happens after everything went dark? Do you think Roz will still make it back to the island? Do you think the RECOs will catch her? What's going to happen? We have to find out. Make your predictions, and I'll check you back here tomorrow.